Welcome into our Backyard Brothers podcast. By the way, this is episode number 25, I believe, that we have done together. Just so you know, I think this will be number 24. I'll have to look in our uh, audio podcast, and then we had one YouTube live video as well back in December. So we're starting to get um a nice list going. So we have quite a bit to talk about. So this was the first schedule that we haven't really had an agenda beforehand in quite a few months, just because of a lot of different sports things that were going on, and so we kind of crafted in some discussions that we had offline and text and things like that into what this day would look like. And so we're going back onto the memory train, the memory rotation, because that was, I thought for all three of us, I'll speak for myself, but I think for all three of us, that was kind of a cool idea to kind of look back into old memories and uh, and delve into what they meant. Today, I'm starting with a memory again. And today has a little bit different tone, and you'll see when I get into that. But it's also based on one thing that we'll get into later, about a particular sports star that passed away. Um, and so I thought the memory could kind of feed off of that. And it kind of it goes into when we talked first about the memories, what that means. These two things popped into my head. I've already talked about one of them, about Jimmerford at BYU, because I was there. The other one jumped into my head immediately, and again, it's going to be a different tone because it's one of those where you were moments, when Kobe Bryant died. And looking back on that particular instance in January of 2020, but also reflecting on his career, and what his career meant to me, and what it meant to you, uh, and the kind of player that he was. And so let me start first by just looking at some of his career highlights. Um, Kobe was drafted at 17 years old. He was the youngest ever first round pick to ever play in the NBA. He was 18 when the season started, but he was 17 when he was drafted, uh, because he came out of high school. Uh, he was also the youngest player ever to be on a All NBA first team. He was the youngest ever All Star starter. He was the youngest ever. I mean, throw in a bunch of other attributes. This kid was young, and he was playing at a great level very early on. If you didn't know, he while he was born in Philadelphia, he was raised overseas. He was raised in Italy mainly, and while his dad was a professional basketball player in Italy. He spoke five languages fluently, in addition to, well, English being one of them. Italy is not a language, Scott. Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and French as well. Uh, and he could have played and gone to any college he wanted, not only because of his basketball prowess, but he was really, really intelligent. He aced his SATs. He could have got to any college he wanted, and he got recruited by Duke, by North Carolina, by his hometown Villanova, by a few teams, a few colleges like that. When Kevin Garnett, a year earlier, jumped to the NBA from high school, Kobe was like, "Whoa, you can do that!" And Kobe did it then as well. Uh, and then he exploded, obviously. For the first year or two, he was coming off the bench, but had such an impact, and then won with the Lakers three straight championships in the early 2000s, and then became Shaq Shaquille O'Neal himself after, I think, one of the games in the NBA Finals in 2002, said, and by the way, Shaq, one of the best players in history as well, but Shaq said Kobe is the best player in the NBA. And for a while, Kobe was doing that, and I'm skipping ahead a few years because of time, but if you remember his very last game in the NBA, against the Utah Jazz, he scored 82 points. uh, he's
It's 50 something. It was 50 something.
when was his 80 point
It was
game?
like 50. 81 points was against the Raptors in 2006.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm thinking of I'm middling two things together. Yeah, his very last game, I remember he scored a bunch, but it wasn't that 80 point game. Anyway, yeah, the 50 point something against the Jazz. The Lakers at that point weren't a competitive team. They had Kobe and a bunch of cast-offs, but Kobe had that send-off game that was amazing. And then after the sports, this guy wanted everything he did. He won an Oscar. Did you know that? He won an Oscar for best animated feature for Love Basketball was what it was called.
Right.
And then, of course, a shocking news in January of 2020 when his daughter, and I think it was 8 other people died in a helicopter crash while going to one of his daughter's basketball games in California. Um, I'll jump back into what Kobe meant, but for a second, just let's talk about where we were when you heard that news, what it meant. That shocking that Kobe died at a young age. He was in his 40s, I believe, early 40s when he died. And I remember, Dustin, you texted me that morning and said, I think Kobe just died. And I turned on the news, and sure enough, there was the news that he had died. And such uh, a big loss for basketball, for obviously his daughter, and he himself, who is a father of 4 girls. And he being in that moment, it wasn't, it was different from other celebrity deaths. It felt different just because of how young he was, of the way that he died, and the career that he had just ended, and the life that he had just started beyond basketball. And so it meant differently. And so let me move it over to you. Where were you? What did the death mean before we go to his life? And that maybe not the
So
right.
for me, like you said, like you said, I texted you. I think I was, scrolling through Facebook or something, and one of the gossip magazines was the first one to put the story on. It says 2 minutes ago, Kobe Bryant died in helicopter crash, and it came from a source that I didn't think was reliable. The same kind of source that tells you the Queen of England is a lizard, that kind of stuff. And so, look, I was like, I don't think so. And so, Google stuff, and eventually more sites start to report it, and then the big sites start to report it, whether that's CNN or other things start to report it, and realize that it was true, that Kobe had died in a helicopter crash along with GiGi and several others. And just the thoughts in the moment of what it meant over the next few weeks. Obviously great sadness for Vanessa and his whole family, and then just the NBA family. And I loved the way that the NBA honored him. And the next day or two, every team would, as soon as the ball was tipped, the team that got it would stay in the backcourt for 8 seconds and receive a backcourt violation on purpose. They would just sit there and stand there with the ball for 8 seconds, referencing the number that he wore, number 8. And then the next team, of course, they turn it over. The next team got it, and they would hold on to the ball for 24 seconds, referencing the other number he wore, 24, and receive a 24-second violation and turn it back over to the other team. And just usually it was either a mix of standing ovation or moments of silence in the crowd, was just remembering what Kobe had done for the game. That this was the player who was the best player in the league for years, for the better part of a decade, if not more than that. And just the respect that all of these young players looked up to Kobe as as the role model, as the player that they wanted to be most like, and remembered him in that way.
Yeah, I was, yeah, I remember exactly where I was. I remember what time it was, all that. I remember I was in Idaho. I was going to school, and it was on a Sunday. And I was sitting in church is where I was, and I think I was just listening to a lesson or something, and just kind of on my phone, and I got an ESPN notification. That's how it came to me. So I'm not sure how long after like the first news broke out, but and I, got a ping. I looked at it, and I just saw some, Kobe Bryant dies at 41, or it was 42 or something like that. And I just, what? And I didn't really know what to think. I just wasn't really processing. So I clicked on it, and at that same point, I saw everyone else in the room start looking at their phones, like one by one, and obviously, in our church, the teacher was just kind of teaching. He didn't have his phone or anything, and he started kind of seeing everyone start whispering, and just kind of turned to a moment of silence in church even. um and but I remember looking at it. I clicked on the notification, and of course, the article, I was like, seven, or it was like 7 sentences long, because they didn't have much information on it. And so I was, no way. And so I started, Googling as well, like you did, Dustin, and started seeing from other sites, Kobe dies, Kobe Bryant dead, all this stuff. And I just couldn't believe it. I didn't, my mind wasn't really processing it. So, and that's kind of how it was for me for the next 2 weeks, is like, is this real? Like, what? And then it really set in and hit me. Kobe Bryant is one of the greatest athletes of all time, in my opinion. And he meant so much, not just to the NBA or basketball world. He meant so much to the sports world. He meant so much to just young athletes, little league kids, people who just were wanting to play basketball because of Kobe, who wanted to play sports because of Kobe. His Mamba mentality idea, because he was a Black Mamba, I think, is kind of what he was referred to as. Mamba mentality, and we've seen it over the years since then. That's kind of become a big thing as well. It meant so much to so many people, um, that it really just shook the world,
Yeah, thanks. And I know we're going a little bit longer on this memory than usual, but
not just the nation, but the world. Um, and the,
I think you're frozen, Cody.
what was that?
You're frozen. There you are.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
We could hear you. We just and you're still frozen now. So uh, anyway,
There we go.
like I said, I know that we're going a little bit longer on this memory, but I just wanted to say as well, as far as the game of basketball, I think there were I can think of maybe 4 or 5 players in the history of me watching basketball that I simply disliked a player or a team because they were just too good. And Kobe was one of those. Kobe and the Lakers was one of those. I didn't dislike Kobe as a person. I mean, the Lakers were one of those teams that I cheered against because they were good for so long. But it was one of those things that, how does he do that? Like, that's not fair that he can do that. And really, Michael Jordan and the Bulls was one of those. LeBron James and whatever team he plays on is one of those. And Steph Curry right now and the Warriors are one of those. Just I dislike them because they're too good. They it's just amazing how good they were. And I remember being again like vocally cheering against Kobe as much as I could. And then when he retired, and the years that have passed since, it's turned into that. Yes, I dislike this guy, but man, there was so much respect in the way that he played the game and how good he was. Uh, and I think for me, he sits on that Mount Rushmore of basketball. Whoever you want to put up there with Michael Jordan, Kobe, Bill Russell, and whoever else you want to put up there, Kobe belongs on that list, on that Mount Rushmore. Anything else from you two before we move on?
Can I share a story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's lots and lots of stories about Kobe and his mentality and the Mamba mentality, as I mentioned, and I encourage all the listeners to just go look up different things. Watch the Redeem Team on Netflix special that has fantastic stories about Kobe and everything he did. And one story that I want to share, and this has become a little more popular through different podcasts, is former NBA player Jason Williams shared the story. Um, Said that they're in town to play the Lakers, and he was really trying to elevate himself to become a starter at this time. And so we said I was going to get to the gym early. I was going to work out all day to really try to elevate that before the game. So see, he got there, and Kobe is there. He's in the gym. He's working out, and Jason says he gets in, puts in an hour of work. Kobe's still working. He takes a break, puts in another half hour. Kobe is still working. And then he stops. He goes and showers, and as he leaves, Kobe is still working. And then he goes to the game, and of course, Kobe's a starter at this point, and Kobe drops 40 something points on during the game. And so afterwards, Jason Williams walks up and asks him. He says, how do you do that? How do you work so hard and then come to the game and put in that kind of effort? And Kobe deadpan looks at him and says, because I saw you there. And I wanted you to know that you will never work harder than me. You will never, ever be able to outwork me. And that's just Kobe's mentality, is everything he took personally. And he wanted everybody to know that he was the best.
Yeah, nice memory. So we jumped from one celebrity death a few years ago to one that literally was last night. Uh, um, and I'll just introduce this and then pump it over. But Jim Brown, the Hall of Fame running back of the Cleveland Browns, passed away last night at 87 years old. A little bit different than Kobe because he lived quite a long life afterwards, but his impact on the game is no smaller than Kobe's was on basketball. Jim Brown and what he did for the Cleveland Browns and what he did after he retired as well, and during. He played in the 60s, 50s, 60s. I think he retired before the 70s hit, but he played 9 seasons in the NFL, led the NFL in rushing in 8 of them, and went to the Pro Bowl in all 9 seasons. Led the Cleveland Browns to 4 straight title games and won one. This was pre-Super Bowl, so but and then off the field, the things that Jim Brown did. Remember, this is the 60s. This is civil rights movement at this time going on in the country. Jim Brown was a black running back. And what he did to continue to push civil rights, uh, equal rights for Black Americans. And he even was part of the big time group that pushed for Muhammad Ali's draft status. And so a lot of what he did for civil rights is important as well, not just what he did on the game, but what he did for the country, for he was a husband and father for many years as well. And so let's pass it over to Cody and Dustin about your thoughts on Jim Brown.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction there. And a lot of that's exactly what I was going to say. He's a Hall of Fame running back, an all-time great for the Browns. He's also, I think the best college player, in all time. He's just insane, and we had talked about him as well a couple of podcasts about how he was a different kind of running back too, and how he still to this day, I mean, 60 plus years later, he is still motivation for kids to be playing football. He's still motivation for civil rights. And I was doing a little bit of research on him this morning about his impact on off the field. And he was part of the, I guess they call it like the Cleveland Summit, a significant turning point for the role of the athlete in society. How he was, a big point in that. And if you look into any sport right now, it's expectation that if you become a pro athlete, you have some kind of charity. You're doing some kind of charity. It's kind of an expectation for that, and I think he's a big reason for that, that turn of the expected role for an athlete in society. And so he did so much for the game of football, so much for sports, and he did so much for the civil rights movement, so much for what they're still doing today, the whole end racism, and all that stuff that's being pushed by the NFL. You can attribute it all back to Jim Brown for the start that he did for that. So I just commemorate him and his life, and he lived a good long life, and we'll miss him.
Yeah, thank you. You guys both, summed up a lot of thoughts that I think each of us had. And the only thing I could add is he is one of those players that really helped kickstart the NFL, or at least push it into a new realm. A foundational player upon which the success of the NFL has been built upon. And so one of the pillars, I suppose you could call him, of what the NFL has become in the last 60 years. He's definitely one of those pillars.
Yeah. All right. We are jumping from memories and eras into our current NBA. That's what we're going to cover most of the rest of this time. So it seems like a long time ago, but let's talk about the Celtics versus the 76ers recap. We weren't able to cover that last week, so just one or two sentences each on that series, that recap. I'll start by saying um, that series could go, I think, 15, and it would be it could go 15, and it would, and each team would win the same amount of games. Those teams were so evenly matched, I thought. It's just that bugaboo for Doc Rivers and game sevens, and whatever that means, if it's a coincidence or not, I don't know, but he can't seem to win game sevens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be true. Go ahead, Cody.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, and I know we've talked about this duo before, but um, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are a crazy duo to watch. It was fun to watch a good game. I was looking at the highlights, and like you said, evenly matched, but just that duo is crazy.
Yeah, I would encourage you to go watch a YouTube channel called Thinking Basketball. Put a little shout out for them. They did some great breakdowns about what the Celtics did specifically in order to overcome the Joel Embiid problem, about what they did defensively, specifically around Robert Williams, the Time Lord, and how they did that. Really a lot better analysis than I could provide, but just fantastic coaching on that level.
Thanks for bringing that up, Dustin, because yeah, Joel Embiid led the NBA in scoring in the regular season, and in the playoffs, he was like 15 points below that, based on some defense, and Celtics were a big part of that. Thanks for bringing that up. So we already gave a prediction last week about the Nuggets and the Lakers. Nuggets lead 2-0 in that series. And so, but let's give a quick recap of what our prediction was for Celtics versus Heat, which most of us are already in trouble because the Heat lead 2-0 too. Believe it or not, they stole both games on Boston's home court. But I said Celtics in 5. That's already gone. So I think Cody and Dustin each said 6 and 7, right?
Yeah, I said Celtics in 6, so Celtics would need to win 4 straight now.
Celtics are in trouble. I'm not sure the Miami's going to sweep that series, but it could. They have 2 games at their home court now. So
yeah, what's amazing about that is in both games, Celtics have been leading at halftime, and in last night's game, Celtics were leading at the end of the third quarter. The Heat are our fourth quarter team, and have come back a lot in fourth quarters to win the game, and it's just incredible to watch their fourth quarter performance.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say real quick that Jimmy Butler is just sensational. That's the word I want to choose to use for him. It's just sensational to watch him play, and how he. I was reading a little bit about his fuel to win. It was after he got that and one, and then face to face with Williams, I think his
Grant
name was
Williams. Yeah.
Grant Williams, and how that kind of trash talk went. I think they both got technicals for that, but trash talk is kind of what fueled him to do it. But he's just sensational. That's the word I'm going to use for him.
And also throw out that this has been a masterpiece of coaching this postseason from Eric Spoelstra. Oh,
Yeah, we talked, a few weeks ago. The question was asked about, do I like a 7-game series? And it talked about the coaching plays such a big impact in going from one team to another, and going from one game to another. And I think that this playoff series has helped to demonstrate that with Spoelstra or Celtics coach, I forgot his name now, but about how coaching has made a huge impact there.
Joe Mazzulla. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. So we just talked about coaching. Let's jump into some coach talk, because we've had a crazy amount of great Hall of Fame caliber head coaches being fired in these last couple of weeks. In fact, every single coach other than other than Steve Kerr that has led the league in wins over the last 5 seasons has now been fired. Mike Budenholzer of the Bucks led the league in wins two of those years. Doc Rivers was let go, and Monty Williams of the Suns. Those 3 are fantastic, high quality, high caliber head coaches. And all 3 were let go after their teams had really good regular seasons, but apparently not good enough. Bucks were beat by the same Heat, who are on their way to a crash course to the NBA Finals. So what can you say about that for the Bucks? And then Doc Rivers, who's won a championship in Boston. We've mentioned his Game 7 struggles, but he's led everywhere he's gone. He wins. Boston to LA Clippers. He was in Orlando even before Boston, and then Philadelphia, and then Monty Williams, who has done some great things with Phoenix after a couple stops in, I think, Oklahoma City for an assistant coach, and New Orleans as well. But what can we say about the way that these great NBA coaches are essentially being turned out for not performing in the playoffs?
Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah, to comment on this, you can look at it from a team's perspective a little bit, where, hey, there's only one championship to go around each year, and if you're a top 5, top 6 team in the league, that you got huge odds to win that championship, and it's expected that you're going to compete for that. However, again, there's only one championship to go around each year, and these these teams, these coaches have had multiple years of being top 5 team in the league and have not been able to make it to that caliber, with the exception of, say, Mike Budenholzer, who won it 2 years ago. And so you can see from the GM's perspective, it's, hey, you're supposed to be able to get there, and if you're not, what am I paying you for? But at the same time, from the other's perspective, there's only one. Only one team can win, and top 5 teams getting far into the playoffs should be good enough to say, hey, keep going at it. We're going to keep working. We're going to get there. So it's disappointing. I don't agree that a team that won 50 games should fire their coach. But it's the reality of, you win or get fired.
Yeah, I agree with what you said there. I don't agree with the decision there, and that with me first stating that these are great coaches and I love and respect everything they've done. My thought on it is that no matter your history or past or your reputation, that can't keep you safe from being fired. And what I mean by that, so like for example, all this happening, let's say, these great coaches who have such a good reputation and history and records, if you're not performing to what the GM expects you to do, that's not going to keep you. And so I guess it's a good way to kind of think of that just because of who you are doesn't mean you're guaranteed.
With a couple of exceptions, right? Greg Popovich in San Antonio can do whatever he wants. he had a horrible year, but it doesn't matter, right? He's built up way too much trust over 35 years or however long he's been in San Antonio. You can jump over to the NFL and say Bill Belichick probably has the rights to leave whenever he wants rather than be fired. And that may be true with a couple other coaches as well. But let me ask this question. So we talked about Eric Spoelstra. Would he ever be in trouble this year, or is it going from 8 to the NBA Finals good enough, or is he? I don't think Pat Riley does that. The same as any other coaches. And let me bring this one up. If Michael Malone doesn't win the NBA Finals, is he in trouble in Denver? He's the top seed in the West. So far, they're 2 wins away from the NBA Finals. But at what point does Michael Malone get in trouble if he doesn't win the NBA Finals?
Yeah, my comment on that is I feel like the Heat and the Nuggets have a very similar culture around their team, and so I don't think either coach is in trouble. But I think Mike Malone probably has 2 to 3 years to win the finals, and that if he doesn't win the finals this year or next year, I don't expect him to be back after next year. That
Yeah,
they can say, hey, you've been a top 3 team in the West for 3 years now. The leash is short, but it's not this season short.
yeah. And you can say Darvin Ham and Joe Mazzulla, who are the other 2 coaches in the Final Four here, they're in their first years. So I don't think that they would ever be in trouble, but you never know. So,
Yeah, I don't have thoughts to add to that.
okay. We're jumping into the NBA, or sorry, that's one we just did. NBA draft lottery happened this week. We had some text conversations that we want to bring into this and also talk about some of those players in the draft for now and for future. But the Spurs won the draft lottery. They had the second highest possible probability to win it behind the Pistons, and they did win it. And the Spurs have had some good success in first overall picks. This is their third first overall pick. Their previous 2 all-time Hall of Fame players, David Robinson and Tim Duncan. So that's pretty good track record. Oh.
Yeah, we were talking about Greg Popovich. I saw a funny comic. Greg Popovich is getting ready to sign his retirement paperwork, and then saw that they got the first overall pick, and he was just kind of like, "Oh man." so,
So,
but yeah, so I think he'll be back and help Wemby.
so I want to, and I'll do this as quickly as I can. I want to make sure I understand the lottery for not for myself as well as for any listeners who may not understand the NBA lottery. But if I understand correctly, there's the first 4 picks are up for lottery. The teams that don't make the playoffs are selected to be in that lottery, and the one with the worst record is the one that has the best chance of making that first pick. Is that correct so far?
Uh, I'll accept the very beginning of that. So the 14 teams that don't make the playoffs all have a chance for the top pick. Although the last 6 or so have like a 0.04% chance or whatever. But technically all 14 teams that didn't make the playoffs have a shot at it.
Okay. So, and here's my thought. I was doing a little bit of research on it. I was reading, I went to Wikipedia. That may not be the best place, but I was looking at Wikipedia. We're doing a little bit of research on it, and it makes sense. I understand it. It definitely makes sense. It takes away the whole idea of it tanking a season. And so the idea is a really good idea. I think for me, this is just me personally, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it as well. I'm so used to the NFL type of draft that it is makes more sense because of how simple it is. It's just you have the worst record, you get the first overall pick. But that also has no way to protect, you know, a team tanking for their season and, giving a screw you to your fans. Um, so I guess I wonder what if a team were to if you are medically cleared to play and you're sitting, then you get fined and your team gets fined. Would that be something that could prevent that from happening and keep the simple draft nature? That's just my question for you guys.
So that exists currently is that if a player is medically cleared to play and chooses not to, they get penalized, they get fined. The entire team gets, the team organization gets fined. That happened with the Mavericks, is they were eliminated from playoff contention and sat their starters the last game, and the GM and several players got hefty fines, and were threatened with losing picks and other things like that. And so they're trying to tailor it to the fans. My thought on the lottery, real quick, is, at least comparing to the NFL, is these other sports leagues, not the NFL, they understand that they're not in first place for viewership, and so they're working hard in order to get as much fan participation there. The NFL doesn't have to do that. And as a result, I think that there's a lot of things that a lot of fans wishes that they could change about the NFL that are not getting any closer to changing, because the NFL doesn't feel the pressure to change those things, because fans keep watching even though it's been declining for years.
Yeah. So how much pressure is Wembanyama under to in this case? He's likely almost 99.9% likely going to be the top pick, right? By the Spurs. And he's going into a situation now where he's joining David Robinson and Tim Duncan as the top picks in Spurs history. How much pressure does that put under a guy to literally compete, to literally be placed into a conversation with two of the greatest players to ever play the game? Is that fair, or is that, and can he do that? So
I don't think it's
Definitely
fair.
not fair. I don't know if he can do that. Definitely not fair. And it's also not fair that he's being called perhaps the greatest NBA prospect of all time, which I do not agree with.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a while ago, and I had my thoughts too about that.
I guess I was just real quick going to say I know I don't think it's fair. It's too much pressure for him, and I wonder. And we've talked about this in other podcasts before, but is the evaluation of him accurate? Is he going to be as good as they say he's going to be? Because a lot of times the first overall pick, isn't sensational as they thought it would be. It's a throwaway pick. It's with evaluating, and so guess we'll see, but I don't think it's fair.
Yeah. We're under a minute, but we have a bit more that we wanted to touch on for NBA draft and prospects for future, as well as this season as it inches closer to the NBA draft. But just say, like Cody said, it can be a coin flip, but as David Robinson and Tim Duncan proved, number one picks can sometimes be as good as they are, and so we'll talk to you next week, and we'll get into a little bit more of that, I believe, in the future weeks as well. Signing off.